Welcome to Health Stealth Radio, where we move away from the mundane to gather insights from the shadows of enterprise and patient cybersecurity. Yes, we surely believe that traditional themes like endpoint software and zero trust are critical, but given massive advances in AI, remote and wearable device hacking, and data hostage negotiators, there's a much darker side to cybersecurity, and not everyone is quite willing to talk about it in public. Health Stealth Radio will thrive on these topics and encourage fireside spats to debate them. Here's your host, Frank Cutitta.
Thank you for tuning in today to Health Stealth Radio. We're broadcasting from the floor of Vive. And I just met with Carter just on the way in here, and we probably did another program in the 15 minutes before we even started recording here. So there's just so many things to talk about. Carter, why don't you introduce yourself so we get that for the record here? And my name is Frank Cutitta. I'm Vice President of Chime Digital Health X, DHX they call it, which is the media, the research, and the community part of Chime. So, and I'm pleased and always welcome to have Carter.
Frank, thank you so much. I really love what you're doing at Health Stealth and just bringing awareness and education not only to the cyber community in healthcare, but the healthcare community at large. My name is Carter Groome. I'm the CEO of First Health Advisory, and we serve nearly 1/6 of the nation's hospitals in terms of, helping them with strategy, helping them with reducing risk in the organization from a cyber and digital perspective. And I love what I do, but it's stressful at the same time. And this is an interesting period right now, in my view, of uncertainty, from the government side, and we need everybody's help to combat the adversaries that are taking advantage of opportunities in this marketplace.
So I mean, we have our own personal stressors, running businesses of our own. But so what would you say right now is? This might be a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but what's the number one business theme stressor right now? What, as opposed to customers and making people happy? Not that they're mutually exclusive.
It's twofold, right? One is in cyber for the sector of healthcare. And, we've always been sort of the most attacked sector of all of the critical infrastructure sectors out there, oil and gas and energy and you name it, transportation. But I'm seeing a massive uptick in sort of your run-of-the-mill attacks, business email compromise, brute force attacks, social engineering attacks on help desk, people impersonating others to try and do, ACH redirects or, multi-factor workarounds. And
what's a brute force attack?
Well, it's just like a password attack. So you're just trying to crack the password. And so we're seeing a massive uptick, and you think, okay, there's got to be some level of connection with the uncertainty right now from the government in terms of just direction, right? And any changeover in the administration creates some uncertainty.
Sure, Democrat to Democrat.
So this creates a little bit more because we don't know their stance on CISA. We don't know what the FBI's involvement will be going forward in cyber ops. We've generally been moving towards a more offensive posture from a national perspective, and right now there's no clear guidance on that posture or sort of what the country's going to do. And healthcare, as with any other critical infrastructure, needs the government as their partner in combating the adversary, whether it's nation state, whether it's e-crime or just even activist hacking. And so that's creating some uncertainty for sure in healthcare. That's creating anxiety for our clients, and it's creating anxiety for me personally because I want those clients to be as resilient as possible.
Absolutely.
Secondarily, what's creating anxiety is sort of on a more, sort of global healthcare perspective. In terms of where funding's at. And so when you think of Medicaid and you think of ACA subsidies, you think of NIH funding, even potentially tariffs and the impact on health systems that buy supplies,
medical
physical supplies from Mexico or Canada, there's, we've all heard the number out there, $880 billion are going to be taken out of healthcare relatively quickly, right? We're going to, make this more efficient. And I think people are generally scared. What impact is that going to have on healthcare at large? So not just cyber, but healthcare at large, and do some of these health systems that may be teetering on the edge, right? 2% margin, 1% margin at best, all of a sudden, go into the red, and they can't even afford to provide care for the communities that need it. And a lot of these are federally qualified health centers, they're critical access health centers, they're rural facilities. That's a big concern. And that's broader than just the cybersecurity risk. It is just a general, what's going on in healthcare in America.
Right. So one of the last times we spoke, it was sort of interesting because everybody was pent up energy. It's going to happen in October. Something's going to be signed before the end of the year. They went on vacation. There was a snow day or something like that. Is all that stuff from the previous talk we had, is that all clawed back or on hold? Is there anything that's kept forward motion?
Yeah, in all of just what we covered, and thinking about really sort of the global, healthcare, and even here in the U.S., talking about the HIPAA security proposed rules and updates seems a little bit benign, right? But it is still very important for those clients that we serve and those that I talk with, and everybody knows that I follow policy very, very closely, because it's just important to understand
it's your business,
what's happening. I will say there's a lot of talk out there that's, you got to get ready for this, rule, and, buy this or, purchase this and do that. And I'm thinking, number one, this is a new administration. Everything is generally frozen. Now, it doesn't, I haven't heard specifically that the HIPAA proposed security rule is dead on the water, but I, generally sense this thing is dead. And I'll tell you right now, in a public forum, I don't support it as it stands today.
Is that right?
Those proposed rules are very burdensome, not just on small rural, hospitals, but the general market of healthcare. Number two, the timelines were completely unreasonable in that proposed rule. And I think thirdly, there's no incentives behind that to do any of this stuff. So yes, there's good practice in there, and a lot of that came from CPGs. I think the intent behind it was actually good, but I believe this group sat in a room and said, let's just throw everything out there. We know it's going to be totally crushed, but we're going to put it out there just so we can make a statement on this is what we think you should be doing as a sector, as a healthcare organization, as a covered entity, or as they're calling now, regulated entity. And there's good practice in there, but just the way it was designed and the way it was intended to be implemented was not a non-starter. So I can't support it, even though it would help our business. Regulation would help our business, but I don't support it at all. And I think in general, if you want to do good practice, you should be doing it already to protect your business. I mean, look at the landscape, right?
Makes too much sense.
You shouldn't, Frank. You should not have to listen to the government tell you what to do to actually be more secure and resilient. Do those things on your own. And by the way, the NIST cybersecurity framework is a more flexible framework that is going to provide even deeper controls than what was put out in the HIPAA proposed security rule. So follow NIST.
Yeah, we had him on our cybersecurity, State of Cybersecurity conference. Ross from NIST. It was good.
Absolutely. So the frameworks are there. The practices are already out there. And I'll say, maybe to conclude the discussion on this, at some point it would be good to have a standard. Not just in the form that came out at the end of the year, but a standard that organizations can say, okay, that's a really good guide, to comply with. And then if I'm doing that, and this is something that, I think I've advocated for many years, if I'm doing these things, maybe number one, I'll get an incentive, and two, perhaps I'll have protections, call it whatever you want, safe harbor from class action lawsuits that are putting further burden on these organizations that get hit with ransomware attacks. So we need some sort of protections there, and that's where I say we need the help of the government. They need to be a partner, with these organizations, not only in fighting our adversaries on their grounds and being more offensive, but a partner that says, okay, we're going to help you if you're trying to do the right thing. Right.
I wanted to go back. I mean, you're running a business. I don't think you're pro bono, from what I understand, right?
No. That'd be a tough cybersecurity business to run.
Wouldn't go well with the board.
I love helping as many people as I can, but yeah.
No. So the reason I am teasing you is because I'm a freak about the economics of part of this business. So I mean, you got to get people to sign contracts. Right. I mean, are you finding that there's a lethargy in people ponying up and spending to get this right, or is it increasing with the velocity of the danger level of these hacks? And is it also mapping together with? I had a data hostage negotiator on in our state of cybersecurity. Is it mapping where people are just saying, I know I'm going to have to pay dough to get this stuff back, so we're just baking that into the budget? How do you look at the economics of this?
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. And I'd say, number one, Frank, right now, I feel like every organization is sort of on their own. And that's something I don't like to see. I like to see these organizations working together to share information, and it happens.
Are you talking about provider organizations or associations like ourselves?
No, provider organizations, healthcare entities,
okay,
right?
All right,
the ones that are really, really vulnerable.
So they're not banding together; they're doing it on their own.
But it happens sort of behind the scenes. There's little groups, and people share information. But at the national level, there's not a level of sharing that I'd like to see, and HISAC's made a lot of progress there. But the uncertainty with CISA that was involved in that. Well, how does that play out? So that's one thing. But yeah, absolutely, organizations. My sense, because of what we went through in 2024, and you've talked
which
about
one?
That
Which one of them?
Right?
Yeah.
But we don't need to cover that ground again. But if there's something good that came out of just an awful year, and that stress sort of carried into 2025, the awareness at the executive level, the board level of these healthcare entities and organizations, not just provider organizations, but all manner of healthcare entities, increased a factor of X. And that awareness then filters into the budget cycles that take a little bit of time to say, okay, this is an imperative for our organization, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z to build resilience in our organization, cyber resilience. And so I've often said, you've got to make it a business imperative to protect the business with or without government involvement. And I'm certainly seeing that move. Right, so it's taken some time. I mean, it's funny. We sat here at this conference last year in Los Angeles, and the Change Healthcare attack was going on right at that very moment. And people in the hallways were like, "Oh my gosh, Carter, you guys must be crushing it. You must be doing so great." I'm like, we're in the middle of an attack right now. I'm not thinking right now.
I'm not selling arms and weapons,
gosh. Right? Yeah, I mean, it's just like the reality of it is, there's a lot of work and thought that goes into it when these organizations start to pivot towards we need to have a better program from a privacy perspective, a security perspective, and an overall compliance and resilience perspective. So I'm seeing that movement now in organizations that might otherwise have thought this is a non-revenue generating investment and we're not going to invest in it. Right. They're protecting the business now.
Do you think because it metastasized with, let's say, CrowdStrike, that it went into, airlines closing down, and that people sort of got how widespread the effects of something as silly as an update can be? I mean, or is it just like, this is interesting news, but I'm going to kill Delta because I can't get on my flight today?
No, it certainly had an impact, right? And when we think about the very foundational basics of cybersecurity, right? Understand what you have and what you're trying to protect, right? That attack surface, or when you talk about asset management, that's all the assets.
Even compared to change. I mean, change was bad, really bad. Yeah. But I mean, when you look at the paralysis that the CrowdStrike, it's not griping about them, they have their own reasons, but the net effect of it, and I can imagine in your business the need to sort of do a when they put it, what I'm looking for, they put it in your blood to track where it's going in your system, sort of that on a cybersecurity level. How far sweeping something of your printer might be in terms of shutting down an auto rental counter across the world. I mean, it's the epitome of global chaos theory.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think the CrowdStrike event really opened the eyes in terms of understanding what you have and how that could impact the operations of providing care, right? You don't have a monitor because somehow it was affected, or you don't have a particular PC, or sort of even, like you said, printers and other operational technologies that you never really considered, right? We talk about medical device a lot, but there's so many other technologies that the provision of care are dependent on, and CrowdStrike exposed that, right? Where the Change Health, that exposed just systemic risk in terms of understanding, wow, I didn't even know that we had that particular platform or application from Change Health, and as a result, we can't drop a bill. So that woke up a lot of people in terms of, wow, wait, we're not generating revenue in this organization? And that's kind of interesting too, right? Is we talk about cyber safety as patient safety, and that is absolutely the case, but hospitals also need to make money, and part of their revenue cycle, if it's disruptive, impacts that. And then
are CFOs coming along? Are they not doing as much blocking and tackling of investments in this as they used to?
I think so.
Yeah.
Generally. I
so they've sort of found religion in a way.
I mean, I sit in a lot of boardrooms. I sit in a lot of CFOs' offices.
I bet you do.
They understand the impact. And I used to come with all kinds of details on, sort of the impact and heat maps and all this other stuff.
Brand equity type thing.
And now, really the conversation's pretty short, is how long can you go without making money, right? I mean, I put it in those simple terms, and they go, well, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, let me
take a look,
show you the 15 different events.
Yeah, it's not making this stuff up, it's just happening.
Where
it's
your
empirical.
peer, couldn't drop a bill for 30, 60 days. And so we're trying to find ways to decrease that time of disruption. I think a lot of people in the industry are going, okay, how can we go from 60 days of downtime if we got completely owned and our infrastructure is fried, to bringing that to a week or 3 days? And so that's where a lot of the conversation around resilience and business continuity and just planning for an incident is occurring. And so that's been a big uptick in just the overall business that we do, but I think generally in the cyber work, because it's not just cyber. You're now introducing clinicians into the mix in terms of doing that resilience planning. You're introducing the business office, emergency management, and leadership. So it's an enterprise risk issue and not just a cyber risk issue.
Okay, I mean, look at how emergency management's come to the fore in just the last 2 months. Yeah. I mean, I taught a bunch of emergency management people in my graduate courses, but I mean, it's really, it's the daily news with what's going on. What do you think about international affairs and hacktivism? Do you find that things are amping up because of Russia? I mean, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas. I mean, did you find stuff happening there of a different form of viewing the world? even though they say, well, look, that's the Middle East, it's not here.
Yeah.
Why should I worry about it in Boston?
There's certainly an impact, right? And it's hard to directly attribute that. I'm sure there are researchers out there that are, looking into that more deeply than I am, but it's hard to ignore what's going on globally, because that does impact our health systems here. It impacts critical infrastructure. And I'll tell you, I'm going to go back to that uncertainty right now. It's creating opportunities for our adversaries to disrupt what we're doing here. And I think that's happening more than ever right now when you think of what's happening globally. And my probably biggest fear in all of that is we're starting to see daylight, Frank, between cybersecurity and national security. And in the past, those two, and especially the last probably 6 or 7 years, have been just absolute in lockstep right now. And if we start to see that come apart a little bit, the consequences could be really scary. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but when we talk about cyber intelligence, we talk about what the FBI does, we talk about what CISA does, and we start disparaging those institutions here, and we start to separate national security and critical infrastructure security with cyber security. That's not a direction I'd like to see us head in.
Interesting. You brought up resilience and business continuity, and Lisa Gallagher, who's our cybersecurity person. I think she's been on your board.
Yeah, Lisa's fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing. But she was talking to a group of us the other day and talking about how CISOs are somewhat reluctant to get into business continuity. It's not our lane. She feels that they say, I understand I have to protect and fortify, but all this other stuff is sort of a diversion from my day-to-day job. Do you think that that a lot of CISOs feel that way? CISOs.
I hope that they wouldn't think I don't play a role in business continuity. They certainly do, right? But then there are clinical leaders, like I said, business office leaders, there are executive leaders, emergency management, supply chain. It's an enterprise, truly an enterprise initiative.
It's a collaborative.
And so the CISO, if there is a cyber event, would naturally need to lead that response. If it's more of a, when we think about all hazards, right? If it's something that's in the business office, maybe the business office leader is running point on that particular response. If there's a flood, if you're a hurricane, if there's a fire, so you've got to do that planning ahead of time. I'm not telling anybody that's listening anything new,
right.
But you've got to drill, you've got to tabletop for these things to happen. And ransomware is a great scenario to run because it's so common. So when you think of ransomware, well, the CISO better be front and center when dealing with that particular incident. When you talk about business continuity, other things can happen. Power can go out. There's fires in Southern California, hurricanes in Florida. So, that is a holistic enterprise approach. And in my belief, everybody needs to be involved to become.
It'd be an interesting conversation for you to have with Lisa, though. She raised a little bit of a stir on the people that we were talking with, but certainly interesting. Just we're coming to the landing here, but you come to a show like this. I mean, obviously, you talk to a lot of people. You get a lot of ideas just talking to people. Is there anything like on the show floor, something you'd like to see? Or I know you can't touch a lot of this stuff because it's not physical, but is there anything you look for in terms of doing your business, that new innovations or things like that? Or are you pretty much in touch with that on a day-to-day basis anyway?
I mean, certainly it's a part of my role day to day, but I love coming here and interacting with individuals and organizations that may be new entrants that can bring a fresh perspective to things. And so I'm always looking for, how can something be done more efficiently in our field to combat the adversary, to reduce risk, right? That at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, is reduce risk in these organizations. So if there's a tool, a platform, a particular service, I want to know about it, because we need to be able to bring that together
Bolt it
for
together.
our client
Sure.
base and say, this is what we're seeing. And it's funny, we talked about AI 2 months ago, like some of the tools may be already different than we're talking about here today.
They're out of date.
And the
yeah.
same generally applies to cyber. Maybe not on that quick of a turn, but tools that we talked about or approaches that we talked about 3 years ago are probably a little bit
Right, because they're
antiquated
so embedded with AI.
Yeah.
The good part of AI as opposed to the hallucination part. So.
And that's the thing I think about, Frank. I think to wrap up is, what I'm looking for here is, from a cyber lens, what is AI doing actually to create more efficiencies, to help with workforce challenges, et cetera. And, is it kind of an arms race between, good and bad in AI, right? AI is helping the adversary, but can AI do good on the other side to protect, detect, and defend? And so that's something I'm always looking for, and I'll be looking for at this conference.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. It's always a pleasure to have you. And I know 3 months from now we'll probably be doing this again and have a completely different storyline. So
I certainly hope
that's always
so.
great. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Frank.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today in the shadows for this episode of Health Stealth Radio with Frank Cutitta. If you like the program, please be sure to share your comments on our social media sites, or feel free to contact us with suggestions for new and stealthy show themes. We look forward to welcoming you again for our next broadcast. In the meantime, stay safe out there.